Generally, my newsletters, I like to give updates on how the books are going, and then I'll offer like a little short story. And of course, my newsletters are always very entertaining, and they have that humor, that tongue-in-cheek, where I like to throw a little sass their way. We've all gotten newsletters where it's very bland, and I didn't want to do that. So I took Nick Stevenson's EMU newsletter marketing course, worth every penny. And I've actually had people email me specifically to say, I love your emails. They're so much better than the other ones out there I've seen. And I think that's because I do put so much effort into entertaining through my newsletters and not just my stories.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 233 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have an interview with Judd, who writes badass fantasy. She's into reading, I know, shocking, an author into reading, video games, plants, sarcasm, and stories with blood and guts. She is also the author of Teeth, a Netherware book, and the logline for that is Even Predators Can Be Hunted. And we actually met one another on TikTok. So we will talk a little bit about her involvement in social media, but that interview with Judd is coming up later in this episode. First, let's hear a word about this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Findaway Voices. Findaway Voices offers authors an opportunity to get their audiobook out into a global distribution network of more than 43 retail and library markets, including, and yes, I'm going to focus on this again if you're a longtime listener, on getting your audiobooks into Chirp. Now, Chirp is owned by BookBub. It's an amazing audiobook platform. It's free. I have a free app, and I have been so lucky to have been featured in a Chirp deal, which was early January, I should say. Oh my God, it's already February. I'm confused. But it started off, let me pull your old calendar off the wall here. Yeah, I have a printed calendar where I wrote, yes, I had the Chirp deal on January 9th, and it ends just over towards this week, Friday, Saturday-ish. One more day as I'm recording this, and today is Thursday, February 3rd. It's one more day that Canadian Werewolf in New York will be 99 cents. And then the other books in the series, I also dropped the price down. Now, I'm going to let you know a little bit of an update based on the latest title. So I did get Fear and Longing. I got Fright Night's Big City back from Scott Overton. I recorded my author's notes, and I got that published as quickly as possible. But unfortunately, when I went to schedule a price change specific to Chirp through Findaway Voices, which you can do, even if you don't get a deal, you can still schedule a price change. And it does show up. They have a little, for every genre on Chirp.com, you can go to the genre, you can look at it, and it shows you recently changed prices. So there are ways that even if you don't get a Chirp deal, you can get some visibility. So I thought, great, I've got all the other books on sale. Why don't we offer something cool to folks, maybe $1.99 or $2.99. So I went in to schedule a price change. Now, I wasn't able to schedule it until it had been live for 48 hours. And then when I went in, it wouldn't let me schedule something less than a week out. And I thought, well, there's no point in creating something it's going to be a week after the promo ends, sort of. So I'll probably do another promo in the future. So I did leave that at full price, which is, basically it's $11.99 US. And on Chirp, because they often offer a bit of a discount, it's $10.99 through Chirp. But that being said, the sale on Canadian Werewolf in New York for 99 cents, which started early in January, has been consistently powerful for me, going from selling none on Chirp to many a day. So, on the biggest day, it was 672 units, not just of Canadian Werewolf, but of Stowaway and Fear and Longing in Los Angeles, and even the short story this time around. So amazing. So I was going regularly selling, let's see, the average, let's say between the, let's go to the 14th, so it's like a week later. The average unit sales of the entire series between the 14th and February 2nd is 31 units per day, which is, again, I'm not making much money on them because they're 99 cents or $1.99. But in total, 1,670 units have moved, 1,670 units, and have made about $970 US. And interestingly enough, I have sold 4 copies of Fright Night's Big City for full price. And so getting your books onto Chirp and getting a Chirp deal is an amazing experience. And I'm thrilled because, as I think I've mentioned previously, this means I'm close to having paid off one of the books, at least, with that money. I still need to earn a few $100 extra, but if I go back and look at sales on all the other platforms, maybe I've made it, and maybe I can report that in a future episode, and I'll talk about this briefly in my personal update, but I'm working on a book with D.F. Hart called Accounting for Authors, and talking about budgeting. And I'm just editing one of those chapters that she wrote, and thinking about applying it and how I would apply that to my own world. But yeah, it's exciting. So Chirp is just one of the things you can get when you use Findaway Voices, and you can't get into Chirp any other way. So what else can you do with Findaway Voices? Well, you can upload your own audiobooks. You can find narrators. They have a new marketplace available to find narrators. And you can also choose. You can decide where you want to go direct potentially, or use different mechanisms to get in, and what you want to use Findaway Voices for. In addition, I did some giveaways recently via TikTok, and I was able to use giveaway codes from Findaway Voices to basically give people access to some of my audiobooks that they won through that method. So lots of flexibility, lots of control, and if you want to see how you can leverage Findaway Voices as an author, you can check them out over at starkreflections.ca/Findaway. Okay, in terms of a brief personal update, I thought I would share some details. So I am working, as mentioned previously, in that ad section of the podcast, that D.F. Hart and I are working on Counting for Authors. The next book, is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Is that the 7th book in my Stark Publishing Solutions series? So, Counting for Authors, she is an MBA, genius, knows this stuff really well. I've had her on previous episode of this podcast. I'm sure I'll have her back again as the book comes to market. But she's done an amazing job of making accounting approachable. But I'm still going in because I still know people are going to be intimidated and scared. So my role in this book, apart from doing the editing and publishing of it, is I'm adding my bits as the guy who doesn't know as much about accounting, and so I'm kind of pausing to ensure the reader's following along, and even offering some other insights into the business of publishing as it relates to my own experiences, so people can see, from her really knowledgeable accounting view, and then my less accounting knowledgeable point of view, but with a business aspect. So working on that. That's book is coming out in March. It's coming up, and I've got a lot of work to still do on it. Deanna's done some amazing work on it already, and now it's in my court to get the rest of those pieces done. Got other projects in the Canadian Werewolf series that Julie Strauss and I are still in the sort of brainstorming phase, but we really have to get button chair and fingers on keyboard to get to that next phase. I'm worried because I'm such a procrastinator, I'm worried she's not going to be my friend by the end of this project. But hey, I've not killed my other co-authors in the past, so I think I've been okay, and so that's a good thing. And then the last thing in terms of personal update is I am leaving this Sunday for Colorado Springs. I'm flying out to Superstars writing seminars with my good friend Kevin J. Anderson and so many other amazing friends who I get to hang out with at Superstars writing seminars. And this is truly, this is one of my favorite conferences to go to. Yeah, I'm co-director this year, so I'm working really hard with Marie Whitaker, who she's working really like 1,000% more than I am on this, because she's been the director for a number of years and knows this well, and I'm just learning. And so I'm just kind of like stepping in and helping here and there. But this will be my first year as co-director, so I'm going to learn a lot more on the ground, baptism by fire, when I get there, late Sunday, to be ready for work first thing Monday morning. But Superstars Writing Seminars is a phenomenal conference of just the most amazing people, and this is all the people who come, the guest speakers, the folks who are there. There's presentations from so many people, but it's really about the community and family. These are people I really admire and respect, and I love getting an opportunity to hang out with. And I really missed not being able to do that in 2021. Now, we did it in 2020, just before everything got shut down, because it was in February, and then everything kind of got shut down a few weeks later. And I really, really miss these people. They are amazing. And I learn so much, even in some of the sessions that I've seen before, and I see it again, and not a lot of the content may have changed in one session, for example. I'm ready to learn something that they were trying to teach me that I didn't pick up on last time. And that's one of the great things about going to conferences is interacting and networking with people, and then even learning things in those hallway conversations, in the evening drinking sessions. And speaking of that, I am so thrilled that I get an opportunity. Jonathan Maybury and I are going to be hosting a haunted parlor, and it's just sort of an informal, it's kind of like talk show where we're sitting in lounge chairs. We're going to be drinking some cocktails and sharing some ghost stories in the evening, and just kind of allowing folks to interact. So I'm kind of going to be interviewing Jonathan for that, but it's going to be a very informal, very relaxed sort of session just for people to hang out if they want to hear, because he's got some really cool stories to share, mostly from his fiction, obviously, and then I have nonfiction explorations that I've researched and written about. So that's one of the many things I'm looking forward to. So many great social activities, so many wonderful people, and I can't wait. Which means sometime between now and next Friday, I'm probably going to record another episode that I queue up. So it won't be live. It won't have any updates in it because I'll be traveling. I won't have my microphone with me. So I'll try and get that done earlier. But anyways, that's it for personal update. And I'm also not going to do comments this week because I want to get right into this interview with Judd. Hey, Elise, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Hi, good to be here.
So this is going to be a fun chat because we're kind of kindred spirits. We're both Canadian authors. We both have a penchant for werewolves. And,
yes.
But one of the things that I found most intriguing, and I got to look at my notes to read this. So your biography is hilarious. And what I really like is that you write badass fantasy, and then you go on to say you're into reading and put shocking in brackets, which was kind of cheeky and cute. But then you like stories with blood and guts. Further in your biography, you talk about getting a degree in computer programming, so you put it to good use by writing again. So there's a lot of cheekiness. There's a lot of humor in your bio. Is that indicative of your writing in general?
Absolutely. I find that all of my writing, whether it's in my stories or whether it's in my newsletter communications, they all carry a kind of tongue-in-cheek sort of snark, just because that's kind of the brand that I'm building up. Okay. And I find it very hard to take myself too seriously. And that naturally came out in my writing and in how I present myself. So I just went with it.
Oh, cool. So I am familiar because I did, and we'll talk about how I discovered this. This is Teeth. This is your first novel in the Netherware book series?
Yes. Technically, it's my second. Okay. There is a prequel novel that I use, to give away to new readers who might not want to, spend money getting to know whether they like my writing or not. So, of course, I offer that. And then many years later, the official trilogy begins with Teeth. So, yeah.
So wait a second. You wrote the prequel early first before you wrote book one?
Technically, I wrote book one first.
Okay.
And then as I got into the writing world, I discovered something called the reader magnet, which I'm sure if any authors are, watching this, they'll understand what the reader magnet is. And I thought, you know what, this is a good opportunity to get to know my world better. It's a good way to offer something to new potential readers. So I wrote I think it's technically a novella because it's only 60,000 words, but it could be a novel. Either way, it's
It's
a
like a
fun
short
read.
novel. It's actually, I think according to Science Fiction Writers Association, that would be in the novel category.
Would that be in the novel category?
So,
I don't
yeah.
know, because in the fantasy genre, when you have like these massive tomes, that's kind of the standard.
That's
It's
true.
like 60,000 words, that's nothing.
So that's one chapter in a Brandon Sanderson novel. Yeah.
Right? I know.
Okay. Yeah. No.
I
Yeah.
like
In fantasy, it's
novels,
short.
man.
Well, yeah, but this is what, a 400-page book.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at 413. Like, this is a quite a thick, meaty.
That's a murder weapon, Mark.
It's a meaty. See, I get that with the teeth. So tell me a little bit about the Netherware. Obviously about teeth, in this series and your character, etc.
So I've always loved the werewolf genre. I grew up on Patricia Briggs. Fantastic. I love her style. Women of the Underworld, which leans more towards like the steamy romance, which is fun too. But I love the werewolf genre. I don't like some of the more cheesy aspects. And so Netherware is a kind of combination of your typical werewolf fantasy genre and then kind of the a little bit of a horror genre that I added in. It's
Okay.
Yeah. I love monsters. As I mentioned in my bio, I do like stories with blood and guts.
Yes.
I will take an action movie over a romantic comedy or anything like that any day. So yeah, add in lots of monsters, add in a bit of weirdness just to take your regular genre and add some fun twists to it. And that's kind of how the Netherware books came to be.
And then you went with Judd. Now, is that basically what females often do? Is like, wait, no, a woman can't write that much blood and guts? Or, I mean, Patricia Briggs, Kelly Armstrong, you mentioned, they don't use initials; they use their names. How did this come up?
Honestly, it is partly because I wanted to keep it a little bit gender neutral,
right?
Especially in the werewolf genre. If you have a female name, I think people automatically assume it's going to be I need to, seduce this alpha werewolf and blah, blah. I didn't want that preconception. I wanted them just to see the name, the title, the cover and think, okay, this is going to be a little bit more scary. And of course, it has my own brand of humor in it, but I didn't want them to automatically go to romance.
Okay. All right.
So
cool.
the Judd is, just a bit gender neutral. And it's nicer to put on a cover because it's short.
Oh, that's true. It'll fit in different ways. So tell me about Danielle Waters. Tell me about your character.
So Danielle Waters is a very young, naive werewolf. She grows up very sheltered, and then things happen, of course, like things always happen, and she discovers a whole world of supernaturals beyond just werewolves. So in a lot of werewolf stories, you often have the human who discovers supernaturals. And I thought it'd be interesting to have a werewolf who grew up with werewolves, but had no idea there was a world beyond that. Okay. And so she discovers these other supernaturals. And as she becomes embroiled in the political affairs and a growing war, she actually discovers that there are other monsters from a completely different world that she needs to fight against as well. So she starts becoming less naive. She, pulls up her big girl panties and she starts fighting some monsters.
Excellent. And again, just the way you said that makes it sound like there's going to be a lot of humor involved in the action and adventure. So, is there a difference? Kelly Armstrong's a Canadian author, like yourself and myself, and Patricia Briggs, I don't believe, is Canadian. Is there a difference in wolves that come from Canada or werewolves that come from Canada?
So Patricia Briggs' werewolves are in Montana, which is, if it's sort of part of Canada in my
It's almost opinion. Like Alberta-esque, right?
Right? Yeah, it's pretty much just like the south of Alberta.
That's right.
I find that Canada is like the perfect location for a werewolf setting, just because we have so much wilderness. If werewolves were real, and between you and me, I think they are. But if werewolves were real, I think Canada would be ideal. So yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, it's true. They're easier for them to get around and navigate with
It
so
is,
much space.
right? I find it less realistic to put them in more Central or Southern America
Right.
just because of logistics. Maybe that's taking the realism too far, but it appeals to me, and I'm Canadian, so it's a win-win.
Why not? Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I ran into that issue from the very first word. Hey, he's in the middle
Yeah.
of New York. Oh, what are you going to do? But that's a logistical question that I thought was humorous. So I
Yeah.
follow that.
And in your book, that becomes like a part of the plot, like trying to blend in
Yeah.
these very urban locations.
Yeah. Whereas it's easier to just kind of shuck your clothes and jump off into the fields or up into the mountains because
That's
too
right.
much wilderness.
No one for miles, it's easy to get naked.
So you're writing these action thriller adventures with blood and guts
Mm,
and monsters and all the fun
yes.
things. But I saw that you help your husband run a dojo out of your home.
Yep.
And so I've got to ask then, is there any research involved when it comes to, fisticuffs and fight scenes and stuff like that? I'm assuming he must be a black belt or something like that. Does that come in
Yes,
handy, having access
it
to someone like
does.
that?
So he's a black belt in jujitsu. However, we kind of our theory is if it's useful, learn it. If it's useful, use it. So
Right.
we have a little bit of all sorts of different martial arts involved, which is fun when it comes to my writing because while I'm not like a master at these things, I at least know enough to provide more realism to my fight scenes.
Okay, cool. Love
For
that.
example, in the old Star Trek movies, you see Captain Kirk doing like the double fist, bam.
Yeah.
That's a good way to break your fingers.
Okay.
So things like that. The average reader probably doesn't know, but for me, it's easier to work out logistics and realism in my fight scenes in my mind, and really be able to elaborate on those blood and guts when I know how a fight scene would realistically uh, you know, roll out.
Right, of course. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So speaking of the realism, this is something I struggled with, and I'm curious to hear how you approached it. So the
Mm,
realism of a human in human form turning
mm.
into some sort of wolfish form, some sort of other animal, and the biology involved. Was there a lot of research involved, or how did you approach it? I know different authors have different ways of approaching the transition and how it works and what it does to their metabolism, etc. Did you have any challenges there or specific guidelines that you said, no, my werewolves are going to be X?
A little bit. In general, I pulled on just the traditional werewolf tropes where you're faster, you're stronger, you have a faster metabolism. So my werewolves need to pay attention to keeping themselves fed.
Right.
Otherwise, they get, cranky and violent. They have enhanced senses. However, the magic system in my book, and I mentioned this other world, there's a very complicated magic system, which I'm not going to reveal because spoilers,
Right.
but it comes into play. And we mentioned Brandon Sanderson a little bit earlier. Brandon Sanderson's laws of magic are just incredible. So I leaned a lot off that. My magic systems tend to be more hard than soft. So I have a whole logic behind why things are the way they are. And you'll find out later on in the series exactly how werewolves get their powers. How do witches get their powers? How do all
Ooh.
these other supernatural creatures get their powers? Like, where does magic come from? And so I put in little hints of that throughout the book. And then as you go through, I'm just about done writing the second book, which is exciting, where
Yes.
we learn lots of secrets. So as you come to learn about that, things start to click into place and you realize, oh, that's why werewolves transform into wolves. This is the reason. This is why werewolves are strong, but they can't use magic. Yeah, so I took a lot of the traditional werewolf tropes, and then behind the scenes, I kind of twisted the reasoning. And as the story progresses, it gets a little bit more weird and it veers away from those tropes. It's fun. It's lots of fun.
So I'm dying to ask as well. So in terms of research, was your research based on other literature? Was it based on reading about wolves themselves? Or, because I did find a complete idiot's guide to werewolves. It was used, it was out of print, but I did find a
Is there an
copy.
actual book?
There is actually a book. I found it well after I started writing it because I thought I really need to know all the different things I don't know about werewolves because I haven't
Yeah.
really read thoroughly throughout the genre. So were you doing research like that as well?
Oh, of course. I think any writer who wants to, you know, do a good job in their writing needs to do some research, whether that's just reading other books in the same genre so that they know kind of what points they should hit to satisfy readers, or whether you dive really deep into traditional lore about whatever magic or creature that you're trying to portray. I did my research by looking up traditional werewolf lore and stories. And of course, because I'm an avid fan of the genre, I've read lots of books on different werewolves and how those authors portray them. So yeah, I took bits and pieces of that and I kind of combined them a little bit. The research is quite fun if you know where to look.
Yes. Awesome. And you're saying that you're teasing it out, but in book 2, you learn quite a bit more about the magic system created.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So you mentioned newsletter, and I want to get back to your newsletter. So you have the reader magnet for your newsletter, but how often are you sharing stuff with your readers?
Once or twice a month.
Okay.
Yeah. So right now, it's been once a month for the last couple months because Christmas is a disaster.
Yes.
Generally, in my newsletters, I like to give updates on how the books are going, and then I'll offer like a little short story. And of course, my newsletters are always very entertaining, and they have that humor, that tongue-in-cheek, where I like to throw a little sass their way. We've all gotten newsletters where it's very bland, and I didn't want to do that. So I took Nick Stevenson's EMU newsletter marketing course, worth every penny. And yeah, I've actually had people email me specifically to say, I love your emails. They're so much better than the other ones out there I've seen. And I think that's because I do put so much effort into entertaining through my newsletters and not just my stories.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. So you've got book 1 out. You've got the sign up for my newsletter, get the reader magnet to learn more about the universe, etc., or to check it out to see if you're interested. How long have you been interested in writing, and what was the switch that got you into writing from your computer programming background?
Like I mentioned in my bio, shocking, I've been wanting to write stories ever since I was a kid. I think that's pretty typical for most writers. I think a lot of people give up when they become adults. And the turning point for me was, I think, my first Nanowrimo.
Okay.
Nanowrimo is a gift from the heavens because it really gives you a community and that motivation to write, whether you know how to or not. And my first attempts were just terrible. I knew nothing. I had more enthusiasm than education. But you know what? There's something to be said for just diving right in and finishing things, that sense of accomplishment. And the learning curve is steep, but you do learn. So I derailed myself. What was the question again?
It was just getting into writing. So what inspired you to start that first NaNoWriMo?
I was an adult at the time. I was kind of in a job that I didn't like. So stereotypical. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to give it a try. At the ripe age of, I think I was like 23, I'm like, time is passing. I'm getting so old now. So I wanted to fulfill my dream of writing a novel. And I found NaNoWriMo just through research online on how to write a novel. I signed up. I did such a terrible job, but I loved it. I was addicted. And so, of course, I didn't continue writing after NaNoWriMo, but the next year I came back and then I got a little bit better and I felt more confident. What curve is it where your confidence is equivalent to your ignorance? And you know, that curve.
Yeah, that's right.
Man, I thought I was amazing until I think it was like 3 half-finished novels later, I realized, okay, maybe I need to figure out what I'm doing because all of my attempts just kind of fizzled into nothing. So I started learning. And the more I learned, like it was so exciting to learn all these things about writing that I didn't realize before and to understand how much effort and passion writers put into their work. the underbelly of all these novels. It was so exciting.
Oh, that is cool. And you've never looked back since, right?
Absolutely.
So you engage with your community once or twice a month as well, entertain them, keep them entertained between books,
Yeah.
etc. I think I discovered you on Instagram. Can you talk
Yes.
about Instagram, social media, and what kind of role that plays in your writing life?
Absolutely. I think that every author needs to engage in social media, if not to gain readers, at least to interact with the ones that they have. I don't think social media is very effective, at least for starting authors like me. I don't think it's effective to get new readers, but it's invaluable for communicating with your existing ones. Because the newsletter, like I said, is once or twice a month. But with Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, you can post every day. And I don't think that people or readers want to see like necessarily what you eat or like, oh, the little things that someone would post on their personal Instagrams. I think it's important to realize what your readers want to see and what they'll find valuable, but you can have a lot of fun with it. Yeah, it's a good way to improve your brand. And like I said, it's just a nice casual way to talk to people who are interested in your work or
Right.
who like reading the same genre.
So is social media, or are there other means? So you talked about Nanowrimo and being involved in that community.
Mhm.
Are there other writing communities, either through social media or locally, that you're engaged with?
I was part of my local writers group for a long time, and then COVID hit,
Oh,
and we couldn't really meet in person anymore.
right.
But I still get their emails from time to time, so that's nice. I think it's incredibly important for writers to find a community to support them, even if it's just really small. I have a couple of very close friends who are writers, because writing is not a solo sport. If you try and do it all on your own, it's going to get so discouraging and lonely. So yeah, I really encourage all writers, especially the newbies, to go out and find their people.
Awesome. Excellent. And so you talked about, so book 2, you're just finishing up. Is that finishing up the first draft, finishing up a round of edits? At what point is it? In case any of your listeners or readers are listening,
Yeah.
like give them some ideas on when this is coming out.
Yeah, I'm just about done the first draft. I only have a couple more chapters to go. I find writing the beginnings is super exciting. Like I said, I'm a person who goes in with more like enthusiasm than anything else. And then by the time I make it to the end, I'm like, come on, I can do this. You'd think with all the blood and guts that happens like at the ending battles, I'd be just into it.
Right.
But at that point, there are so many like loose ends to tie up and to bring everything all together. And it's just like, okay, how do I make this happen without killing everybody off? Because that's a temptation too.
Sometimes it can be, yeah. So
Right?
so that sort of leads to the next question then. Plotter, pantser, where on that spectrum do you sit?
I'm absolutely a plotter. I live and die by my plotting. I have organization upon organization. Like I used to be a person who couldn't. Have you heard writers say, oh yeah, I imagine these scenes in my head and they played out like a movie? Does that happen to you, or have you heard writers talk
Yeah,
about that
yeah,
much?
sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, that never used to happen to me. And I could only write by plotting exactly what would happen line by line. That's
Okay.
what carried me through. Now, however, once I've become more experienced, I have the writing experience to be able to explore these scenes in my mind and kind of play them out to get an idea of not just what happens, but kind of how the scene should feel,
Right.
Because there's a difference between just this happened and oh my gosh, this is amazing. I can't even, So yeah, I guess once you get more experience, whether you start out as a pantser or a plotter, in my opinion, you'll come to a little bit of a middle ground as you gain more experience writing more stories. But I still am a plotter at heart.
Good stuff. You had talked about when you get to the end as you're wrapping up, is that where you're deciding, oh, I should change this, or I have a new
Yeah,
idea? That usually comes up, right?
that's the point where the little deviations I have along the journey start to all come down on me. And I'm like, oh, my plan is failing me. I need to come up with something else.
Yeah, I threw too many hooks on the journey.
Yeah.
Excellent. So what would you say to a beginning writer who's listening to this, or someone who's just kind of getting started, hasn't released their first book or done any of the things? What's some advice that you would want to share with them?
Advice I'd want to share with them: read about writing as much as you can. There are so many free resources online that can get you started. And then if your library has books on writing, those are super helpful as well. Even the really old books, the art and craft on writing will never age. So go back to these oldies. Also finish things. I find that a lot of newer writers, especially the writers that I've talked to in my writing club, like in person, they really struggle to finish their stories, and they struggle to improve their craft because they're not finishing them. There was one lady who has been working on her novel for 20 years. And that's great if you're wanting to be a hobbyist, but if you're wanting to sell your book or even just have other people read it, you need to learn how to finish things, because that's the only way you're going to improve. So yeah,
Awesome.
that's my advice.
Thank you. And that's fantastic advice. So, Elise, can you please let my listeners know where they can find you online, learn more about you, and check out your books?
Sure. You can find me at eejudd.com. That's my website. And you can download my free prequel to the Netherware series there. Or you can go to Instagram, author Judd. And my books are on Amazon, so you can buy them there.
Oh, awesome. And now, before I sink my teeth into teeth, which I have a print copy of in front of me, do you recommend that I actually check out the reader magnet first? Is that going to help me, or can I read this and then go back to that?
You can read this and go back to it.
Okay.
Yeah, I made that first one so that it can be a standalone. You can read it before and the events of book one, be like, I recognize that character. Or you can read book one and then go back to the prequel and have a few events mentioned in the first book make sense because of the prequel, but
Awesome.
they can be separate. Yeah.
Enjoyable either way. Great. Well, Elise, thanks so much for coming on my podcast.
Thank you so much, Mark.
So there were two things I wanted to reflect on about the conversation with Elise. And the first was when she was talking about social media and she was talking about her newsletter for her fans. She talked about engaging with readers, not finding new readers. Nowhere in any of the things she said when she was mentioning social media and what she does on Instagram and what she does with her new newsletter, nowhere in there did she talk about selling or using her newsletter or using social media to sell. And I want to pause and point out the significance and high value and importance of that. What did she talk about? She spoke about giving and sharing and creating an interesting experience for her readers. Again, engaging with and connecting with her readers, not finding new readers, not selling to them, but giving them an experience. And that's critical. That is a really critical perspective on social media and newsletters. So I want you to reflect on that. When you're thinking about your own author newsletter, when you're thinking about how you engage in social media, are you thinking about the experience for the reader, or are you just trying to sell them something? The other thing I wanted to reflect on was Elise's advice about finishing things. And I'm guilty of that. I have so many unfinished projects all over the map, but the ones that were successful are the ones that were finished. Yes, there's finished projects that were not successful, but the unfinished projects are 100% guaranteed to be unsuccessful, whereas it has to be finished first. So you're limiting its ability to be successful by not actually finishing. And that's another sort of important thing is, and even you can't edit or you can't clean it up until you have something to edit or clean up. You actually have to finish. So it's getting those words out, vomiting them onto the page if you have to. Because when it's finished is when you can polish and when you can make it clean and when you can make it good. And so that's a really important bit of advice I want you to reflect on as well, is what are those things that you're holding yourself back from because you didn't take the time to finish. So that's it for episode 233 of the podcast. That's it for my post-interview reflections. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Elise. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you want to support this podcast, you can leave a review on the podcatcher of your choice. Share it with a friend that you think would find value in it. You can also support this podcast and join the awesome family of patrons of the Stark Reflections podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections, where you can just be part of that action, part of that activity. And thank you so much to my existing patrons for all you do to support this podcast. And thank you, dear listener, for listening. So, until next week and next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.